In the annals of true crime, Jane Toppan stands out as the Silent Stalker, an eerie moniker that hints at the terrifying story that follows. A name that sends chills down the spine, Jane Toppan was no ordinary woman. She was a nurse, a caregiver, a person you'd trust with your life. But beneath this facade of care and compassion lurked a sinister darkness. Toppan turned out to be a serial killer, a silent predator who preyed on the sick and the helpless, people under her care. Her weapon of choice? Poison. A slow, silent killer, just like herself. Her crimes were not acts of passion or rage. They were calculated, cold, and clinical, just like her profession. Her deeds left a scar on the face of history, a chilling reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink. So, who was Jane Toppan, and what led her down a path of such darkness? Jane Toppan was born into hardship, a fact that would cast a long shadow over her life. Born as Honora Kelly in the mid-19th century, she was the daughter of Irish immigrants, a family struggling in the throes of poverty. Tragedy struck early. Her mother died of tuberculosis when Jane was just a toddler. Her father, known for his instability, was eventually declared insane. With a father unable to care for her, Jane and her sister found themselves in the Boston Female Asylum, an institution for destitute children. From there, at the tender age of 6, Jane was indentured to the Toppan family, thus acquiring the name we know her by today. The Toppans, while providing a roof over Jane's head, were far from the loving family she was robbed of. Jane was treated more like a servant than a daughter, and the emotional neglect she experienced was palpable. Jane's early years were not without their hints of the darkness to come. She was a bright child, but she had a penchant for lying, a trait that would persist into her adulthood. The other children found her unsettling, her tall tales about her past and her strange sense of humor often leaving them uncomfortable. This social isolation only deepened the chasm of Jane's emotional turmoil. Adolescence for Jane was a tumultuous time. The emotional neglect she experienced in the Toppan household, coupled with the hormonal changes of puberty, sparked a descent into depression. She was reported to have developed an unhealthy fascination with death and suffering, often spending hours alone, lost in her macabre thoughts. These early years formed a twisted foundation upon which Jane Toppan would build a horrific legacy. The hardships and emotional struggles she faced were not excuses for her actions, but they do provide a glimpse into the troubled mind of a woman who would become known as the Silent Stalker. As Jane Toppan grew older, the disturbing patterns of her childhood began to manifest in terrifying ways. Her path to darkness was not sudden, but rather a slow, insidious descent into a world of malevolence and chaos. Jane's first step into the medical field was as a nursing student at Cambridge Hospital in Massachusetts. Even as a student, her fascination with death and the power to control it was evident. She would make her rounds, not with a comforting smile but with a sinister curiosity, often administering drugs to her patients just to observe their reactions. Her classmates found her obsession with the power of life and death unsettling, but none could predict the extent of her malevolence. Jane's transition into a serial killer was as subtle as it was terrifying. Her first known victims were her elderly landlords, whom she poisoned under the guise of providing medical care. The deaths were ruled as natural, and Jane moved on to her next victims without raising any suspicion. Her modus operandi was simple but effective. She would gain the trust of her victims, administer her deadly concoctions, and then watch as they succumbed to her lethal treatment. But Jane's crimes were not driven by financial gain or revenge. Instead, they were the result of a deep-seated desire for control, a desire that was rooted in her troubled upbringing. With each life she took, Jane was reclaiming the power that had been stripped from her as a child. She was no longer the abandoned orphan, but rather the arbiter of life and death. As Jane's confidence grew, so did the audacity of her crimes. She began targeting people closer to her, including her friends and even her adopted family. The thrill of the kill, paired with the satisfaction of getting away with it, was intoxicating for Jane. Her actions were not just those of a killer, but of a predator reveling in her power over her unsuspecting prey. Despite the mounting death toll, Jane's profession as a nurse and her seemingly caring nature allowed her to continue her deadly spree undetected. She was a wolf in sheep's clothing, using her position of trust to prey on the vulnerable. Jane's descent into darkness was complete, and she had become a master of deception. However, even the most skillful predators leave traces, and Jane was no exception. Suspicion began to grow among those close to her, but it would take several more deaths before the full extent of her crimes would come to light. The stage was set for a series of chilling crimes that would shock the nation. Using her position as a nurse, Jane Toppan was able to prey on the most vulnerable with terrifying ease. The medical profession, which is often seen as a haven of healing and care, was turned into a hunting ground by this seemingly gentle woman. Toppan, or Jolly Jane as she was often called, had a specific modus operandi. She used her knowledge of medicine to administer lethal doses of drugs to her victims. But her cruelty didn't stop there. Jane would often climb into bed with her dying victims, holding them close as life slipped away, claiming she wanted to see the inner workings of their souls. A chilling thought, isn't it? Her victims were not chosen at random. They were often people she knew, people she had formed a bond with, making her crimes all the more sinister. It started with her elderly landlords, the Davises, who she poisoned one after another. Then there were her friends, the Gibbs family, and even her own foster sister, Elizabeth Brigham. Jane's choice of victims reveals a pattern. Many were elderly or seriously ill, people who were already on the edge of life. This made it easier for Jane to commit her heinous acts without arousing immediate suspicion. After all, it wasn't unusual for people in such conditions to pass away. The Silent Stalker was indeed clever in her wickedness. The number of victims is still a matter of debate among historians. Some say it was as few as 12, while others suggest it could have been as many as 31. What's known for certain is that every victim met their end through Jane's poison touch. The exact motive behind her crimes is hard to pinpoint. Some speculate it was a twisted form of control, a way for Jane to play God with the lives of others. Others believe it was a manifestation of a deep-rooted resentment for the world and the hand she'd been dealt. But what's most chilling about Jane's story is how long she was able to continue her killing spree. For nearly a decade, she slipped through the cracks, her crimes going undetected. She was both a trusted nurse and a silent killer, hiding in plain sight. Jane's story is not just about the crimes she committed, but also about the system that failed to catch her. It's a tale of misplaced trust and unchecked power that allowed a killer to hide in the shadows for far too long. But as the death toll rose, so too did suspicion. How could so many people die under the care of one nurse without anyone raising an eyebrow? The answer to that question led to the unmasking of one of the most notorious female serial killers in history. Jane Toppan's reign of terror could not last forever. The net was closing in. In the early days of the 20th century, Jane's deadly game of cat and mouse was finally brought to a halt. It was the death of the Davis family, 4 individuals who met their end under her care. That raised suspicion. Authorities began investigating, and the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Autopsies revealed lethal doses of atropine and morphine, Jane's signature cocktail of choice, in the bodies of her victims. The evidence was damning, and Jane Toppan was arrested, facing the grim reality of her actions. The trial that followed was nothing short of sensational. The courtroom was packed, the public gripped by the shocking revelations. Jane's defense was insanity, claiming she was driven by an uncontrollable impulse to kill. But what truly sent shivers down the spine of every person listening was her chilling confession. Jane admitted to 31 murders, a number that dwarfed the initial estimates. She confessed with a cold, detached demeanor, causing many to question the depth of her humanity. Jane described her actions in haunting detail, revealing how she would administer a lethal dose, then hold her victims in their final moments, watching as life slipped away from them. It was a perverse sense of power and control that drove her, a thrill in being the orchestrator of life and death. The jury deliberated for just 27 hours before delivering their verdict: guilty. Jane Toppan was declared not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to Taunton Insane Hospital for the rest of her life. The woman once trusted to bring healing had been unmasked as the deliverer of death. Jane's case was a dark reminder of the trust we place in those who care for us. Her ability to kill without raising suspicion, to blend into the background while committing horrific crimes, earned her the nickname, the Silent Stalker. It was a title that would follow her to the grave and beyond. The trial of Jane Toppan shocked the nation, serving as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the most unsuspecting of individuals. It was a case that challenged the public's perception of innocence and guilt, of sanity and madness. With her conviction, the chilling tale of the Silent Stalker reached its grim conclusion. A tale that forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters can sometimes wear the most benign of masks, hiding in plain sight, silently stalking their prey. Jane Toppan's story is a testament to this unsettling reality, a story that continues to haunt the annals of true crime to this day. The impact of Jane Toppan's crimes reverberated far beyond the courtroom. As news of her monstrous actions spread, a wave of shock and disbelief swept across the nation. Here was a woman, a nurse no less, who had used her position of trust to prey on the vulnerable. It was a chilling betrayal that left a lasting scar on the public psyche. The case of Jane Toppan, the Silent Stalker, challenged societal norms and instilled a sense of unease that lingered long after her trial. She became a symbol of the dark side of human nature, a stark reminder of the potential for evil that can exist even in the most seemingly benign of individuals. Her crimes also cast a long shadow over the nursing profession. With the revelation that Toppan had used her medical knowledge to murder her patients, questions were raised about the safeguards in place within the healthcare system. It prompted a reevaluation of the role of nurses and the trust we place in them. In addition to the shockwaves her crimes sent through the medical field, Toppan's case also sparked a broader conversation about mental health. Her defense team's assertion that she was driven by insanity led to a public debate on the nature of mental illness and its intersection with criminal behavior. It highlighted the need for a better understanding and treatment of mental health issues, a topic that remains relevant even today. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of Jane Toppan's legacy is the fascination her story continues to inspire. Her life, her crimes, her motivations, they all form a chilling narrative that continues to captivate true crime enthusiasts. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human nature and the dark depths it can plunge into. Jane Toppan's story remains a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. The tale of Jane Toppan, the Silent Stalker, is a chilling chapter in the annals of true crime. In a disturbing journey from troubled child to notorious killer, Jane's story is a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary individuals. Her horrifying legacy as a poisoner continues to captivate and chill us to this day. Jane's crimes, her arrest, trial, and ultimate fate continue to generate intense interest and debate. The impact of her case on the public and the legacy she left behind as a killer nurse is a testament to the enduring fascination of true crime stories. There is so much more to uncover, so many more stories that are waiting to be told. We invite you to delve deeper into the intriguing world of true crime with us. What are your thoughts on Jane Toppan? Share your insights in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the darker corners of human history.